Back to this another tutorial, and in this tutorial we're going to talk about how to think in compose. Okay, so the basic concept that we will be learning in this tutorial is first thing is we'll be learning how to think in compose while building your Android applications. And the second thing, the most important thing that we will learn is like how do we combine basic composables to create a complex UI. Okay, so while thinking in compose, we shift our thinking from to focus on what instead of saying how. Okay, so what is Jetpack Compose, guys? Jetpack Compose is a declarative UI framework that you simply describe. What you do in this framework is you simply describe what your UI should contain using the code, and the compose handles the rest of it. Okay, so this is a way of writing UI in a very different from that we used to do. Okay, so in ancient time, like not in ancient time, let's say before compose, we used to do use XML files, right? As you can see here, this is the XML file. We used to use this XML file to declare our UI. Okay, so in this article, like in this tutorial, we will try to cover the difference between the Vue XML file versus using the Jetpack Compose, and we will also guide you how to shift your thinking from using XML files to using Compose for building the modern Android UI. Okay, so what we do in the XML file, as you can see here, this is a simple example. I have already created a simple example, which is a simple survey. Okay, this is the activity survey XML file. As you can see here, it lies here in this activity survey. So we have this declared in a layout. Okay, so as you can see, there's resources. Okay, so this activity survey XML file, what we have to do is we have to so what we do in the Vue XML file is like we have to describe in step-by-step process how to get our UI to look in a certain way. So this is our UI, so we want our UI to look in certain this way. Okay, so it is like a survey which will have a questions, radio buttons with the answers, and finally you submit your answer, right? So this is our UI, that how we will be how we want the UI to look like. Okay, so this is what we do in Vue XML file. Okay, and we have to find the view from the XML code by using the reference like find view by ID, as you can see here, and then finally use certain functions like getters, setters, like for example this to get the radio group, we use find view by ID to get the reference to this view and find a radio group reference, and then we use this view reference to do the perform certain activities like clicking, okay, and assigning, like maybe making toast and submit, like you can enable and the submit button, like obviously you want to, whenever the you click the answer, you have to enable the button, right? So the submit button, because if the answer is selected, then only you have to enable the submit button. So this is how the things is gonna look like. Okay, so in our approach, when we use XML file view approach to describe the UI. So now the scenario comes when we have to use Compose. Okay, so now let's shift our thinking from using Vue to using Compose. Okay, so how do we shift our thinking? So what is how do we do this in Compose? Okay, so how do what we do in Compose? Okay, so this is a simple question that we have to ask. So we do not use this XML files. Okay, so first thing is you have to forget about this XML files. You have to forget about this resources layout folder. Okay, you just forget it. Okay, you don't need to use that anymore. So this is the biggest advantage. And you describe your UI entirely using just the code. Okay, just the code. I'm gonna show you the compose implementation of this view. Okay, so here we will be taking the full advantage of Kotlin constructs. Okay, so you construct your UI by describing what, not how. Okay, so this is the key concept that we need to understand, the difference between view and compose. So this make the compose more intuitive to work and understand much better, okay, your code. Okay, so this helps you to create more robust application. Okay, so I also have a simple, I will shift my screen and I will just show you. This is the compose implementation of the view that I just created using this was the XML implementation, and now this is the compose implementation, and you see it is all entirely just like composable functions. I do not need to use XML files, right? You know, it's such a amazing thing. And okay, so there by saying this, there are some interesting things that you have to understand. Like, to populate the view with the UI state, we have to obtain the reference to its views, as here, as you can see here, we have to use the reference for each view by using find view by ID, and we have to call the respective listeners for ready bottoms to check the answers selected, and we need to do update the submit button to enable, you know, all these things like blah 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 things, like you just it's more simplified using compose. Okay, so obviously you need to also consider that by doing all these things, the manually updating this kind of view was more error prone, because sometimes you need to you will forget to update the view with the dependent state, like also like during the configuration change, you know, like the your update state is not, it will just like, you know, reselect to the unselected state, you know, even if the answer was selected. So this will create a lot of problems, you know. So like compose is the best solution. Okay, so using compose, we will define everything in code. Okay, as you can see here, let me shift the screen. Okay, so using compose, we will define everything in code. We no longer need XML file. UI elements are defined as functions and not objects. So this means you don't need to find a reference to them and call methods to mutate them. So instead, UI elements are entirely controlled by the state or arguments that you pass. Okay, so here we are just describing how our UI should look like, and there are no find view by ID and setter calls. Okay, here, so you don't need to see any things like that, like find view by ID here. So okay, note that tapping the radio button, okay, this tapping the radio button, as you can see here, you will not actually select so just keep on note that when you type this ready button in compose, your ready button will not be selected, but instead here you see the view was selected, right? It will not happen in compose. Because why is this is happening, what is the difference between these two, is because views, in view, the ready button doesn't hold its own state, that automatically changes due to user events. Okay, so in actually in this view implementation, this radio button will not hold its own state. Okay, that automatically changes whenever you when the user interacts with the radio button. Okay, so in compose, radio button state is controlled by the values that are provided into it. So whenever the radio button like, you know, the in compose radio buttons, the state is being controlled by the value that is passed through it. Okay, so whatever value is passed through it, and it will be controlled by these values. Okay, so I have declared this as selected. You can also pass it as selected boolean is selected is selected. As you can see here, this ready button selected is passed is more controlled by the value that is being passed through it. Okay, so now I have to change this selected as a, just let me it's not selected, so can just say that yeah, okay, no problem. So this will be just controlled by here. Selected will be is selected will be selected. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so you can just modify it in this way. Everything is all dependent due to the input value that is being provided by the it all depends on the input value that is provided to this composable functions when you create the composable view. Okay, so this is the most important thing that you have to understand, the difference between the view and the compose. So you need to understand that in compose, the ready button state is controlled by the values that are provided into it, as you can see at the value that is provided by it. Okay, so this is the core concept of what, okay, not how. So we are declaring what our UI should look like by providing the necessary state when our UI functions, but we are not telling how it should render the state. Okay, so now the question will be there, that now you might have questions that if the state controls the UI, how do we update the state to update the UI now? So in compose we do this using events. Okay, so there is a UI elements like like you emit the events, whenever you click, you emit the events, like you on selected you emit the event, and you change here. So this is just a simple change, but in future lectures I will be providing how to use states to handle these events. Okay, so this is a simple steps. Okay, right now I'm just using simple steps. I will be in the later lectures, I will be also teaching you how to use states, how do we use events to update the state. Okay, so what is happening is like whenever you your UI elements is being is clicked, you emit your events. Okay, you emit your events, and the event handler will be there to handle the events and decide what to render. Okay, so this event handlers will be there to handle how to render the UI. Okay, so this is what is happening in the Jetpack Compose. Okay, so so if the UI state changes, the functions or UI elements, like if the UI state changes, obviously means like your state is changed, that means your UI will be obviously being changed. Okay, so this is how it is happening in Jetpack Compose, and this process is called regeneration. Okay, so regeneration of the UI. So whenever the state changes, like is selected is like it everything is dependent on is selected. Like if is selected is true, then your radio button would be selected. If the is selected is false, your radio button will be unselected. Okay, and this selection is all being done here in a simple way. This is simple steps, like selected, I am just changing the value to not selected. Okay, it's just reversing the value, and like I'm just changing the state here. Okay, so this can be done more advanced way, but I will be teaching you how to do that in later lectures. Okay, so but the important concept that you have to understand is in compose, everything is handled by like it's all depends on the state that is being passed to the composable functions. Okay, what is like the UI changes is all dependent on your all is dependent on the states that is being passed by. Okay, if the state is enabled, then your UI will be enabled. The radio button will be enabled. If the state is disabled, then your UI will be disabled. Okay, so this is how the things is running in Compose, and everything and all this process is called recomposition. Okay, this is how this is the core concept of Jetpack Compose that you have to understand. Okay, so finally, to summarize the entire concept, this tutorial was all focused on how to teach you about how to think in Compose. Okay, so to think in Compose, to summarize, I will tell you, in Compose we describe what, not how, while describing your UI. So second important thing is like your UI elements are declared as composable functions. As you can see here, it's annotated with composables. And the third thing is, to control the UI, we have to pass the state. Okay, so this is a simple example of a state. So you can, for a complex UI, you can also have complex states that we will be covering in upcoming lectures. And finally, we use events to update the state, which is in return updates our UI. Okay, we use events to update the state, which in return updates the UI. And thank you guys for listening, and catch you up in the next lecture.